Welcome to Just the Facts with City Attorney Richard C. Pfeiffer Jr., a program highlighting the work of the lawyers and support staff in the Columbus City Attorney's Office as they defend the city, prosecute crime, and help protect our neighborhoods.
The experience of being abused is very, very traumatic. It comes with a lot of aftermath to deal with, even when that abusive individual is out of your life. So when you are trying to get to that point where that abusive person can no longer be in your life, it's important to ensure that you give yourself support during this process.
The scars of domestic violence can be deep and indelible. As studies show, the impact often continues from generation to generation, as children from violent homes are more likely to become abusers themselves. I'm Columbus City Attorney Rick Pfeiffer, and in this episode of Just the Facts, we'll be focusing on how we try to break this cycle of violence through our Domestic Violence and Stalking Unit, a group of specially trained prosecutors and victim advocates who work together with a host of community and governmental organizations to provide a centralized resource and support system for victims of domestic violence and stalking. Before we get started, just a few facts. Our Domestic Violence and Stalking Unit consists of a director, 4 specialized prosecutors, a chief advocate, 2 lead advocates, 12 full-time victim advocates, including a Spanish-speaking advocate liaison, 3 support staff members, a Somali outreach advocate, a cyber crimes investigator, liaisons from Choices, Franklin County Children's Services, Southeast Mental Health, and Capital University Law School's Family Advocacy Clinic, and 2 stalking investigators under contract. Last year, this team provided victim advocacy services for 6,137 victims of domestic violence and 386 victims of menacing by stalking. 433 protection orders were issued in the arraignment courts. Statistics indicate that domestic violence victims wait 5 to 7 incidences on average before contacting authorities. But once that call for help is made, a whole network of support sets in motion. That network is what this program is all about, and we hope those who watch will see there is an entire community of dedicated people and organizations ready to help. So please, do not wait. Call the safety and security everyone deserves. Many times that initial call for help is made to 911, and police officers are the first point of contact for victims of domestic violence. Columbus Police Chief Kim Jacobs and sheriff's deputies, led by Franklin County Sheriff Zach Scott, work with our office to help protect victims of domestic violence. Police Chief Jacobs has made protecting victims a special point of emphasis during her tenure.
First of all, it starts with our training academy. Before we do our training for our recruits, I go in there and introduce the subject to those brand new candidates to be police officers and talk to them about the impact that the domestic violence does have on the community, and that it is not a family crime. It's not just a family issue that it was viewed as years ago. We have a role in it. It's a crime problem that affects many, many people. And if you can imagine the victim of domestic violence who suffers emotionally, physically, sometimes sexually, abuse on a regular basis, we have a responsibility to help them as much as we possibly can to address the crime that's happening in their home.
Now, as the chief of police, you have these officers who probably would be the ones who first show up at a household where there's a problem, correct?
They're the first responders to
So
it.
what can you tell that victim out there that they can expect from the Division of Police and this system that's trying to help them?
They should expect from our officers at the scene is support, protection from any immediate more abuse from happening, information about how to seek help. It will help them identify how we can file the charges, what their rights are with regard to getting protection orders, and then the next steps. If they need a shelter for the night, we can tell them how to get in touch with Choices. We can tell them how to get in touch with the Center for Family Safety and Healing so that they can get advice from many advocates. The prosecutor's office has witness advocates that can help them address some of the needs that they might have as a result of being a victim of domestic violence.
I think part of the problem is why it takes so long for women to actually take a real action is they're not aware of how many different organizations out there they have at their disposal to be able to actually get some support.
Well, let's assume hypothetically that the person's right now in a harmful situation and needs help immediately, what would you tell that victim to do to reach out to you to get your help?
If they're being beaten right now, call 911. That is a crime of violence, and we need to get there immediately. So 911 is the answer if you're in immediate situation, immediate imminent danger. If you're not, and it happened, hours ago or yesterday, you can call our non-emergency line, 645-4545, and an officer will be dispatched to take the information from that victim, write a report, get all the evidence that there might be at the scene, and then tell them what their rights are and how to go about filing charges or getting protection.
But to get your help, they have to reach out and call.
I encourage everyone to. There is no way that anyone should have to worry about, if I go home, am I going to be abused again today?
They got to call us, and we're there to help. We're not there to separate the family. We're not there to pass judgment. We're there to keep them safe and to make sure that they get the help that they need for their entire family and themselves.
Having a safety plan is important for those who have already suffered violence or fear its reoccurrence. Try to set aside some cash, extra clothing, extra keys for the house and vehicles, and important documents. If you need to leave in a hurry, think about where you can keep these things in safety, perhaps a friend or relative's house or neighbors. Think about where you would go for help. How would you get there? What plans could you make for your children? Organizations such as Choices can help answer these questions.
My job is similar to the city advocates. However, if someone needs directly linked to Choices services like shelter or counseling or any of our support groups, I'm able to provide that linkage, which takes away additional barriers from the victim so she doesn't have to reach out herself.
So you know that sometimes we develop escape plans for women in domestic violence situations.
Yes.
And you just said a key word, shelter. So Choices has a place.
Yes.
Where someone could go and feel safe and stay with a child or children. Is that correct?
Yes.
And how long has this been going on?
The shelter was developed in the end of the 70s. It's a confidential location. We allow people to come 24/7. They just have to call our hotline. We assess them to make sure they're appropriate and are able to meet their needs, and then we just go from there with them.
How does a victim know that you're out there? How does a victim know that Choices is there to help and protect?
Just like how Choices has a community group here with the city, we also have that with other agencies. So basically, whenever violence is a factor, we're the primary agency in town that deals with domestic violence. So there's programs at Children's Hospital and just other locations where our name is out there and our number is out there.
One of our most important community partners is the Center for Family Safety and Healing. The center, which is affiliated with Nationwide Children's Hospital, is dedicated to the treatment and prevention of child abuse. Through their collaborative approach, many agencies now work together as one team.
Originally, the entire organization was created to reduce the trauma on victims so they didn't have to go to 5 to 6 separate places to tell their story. We're all here under one roof. We have with us the Columbus Police Department, Choices, the shelter. We have mental health services through Children's Hospital. We have a full medical clinic here for the kids. We also have housed here Franklin County Children's Services, 3 units here. So what makes it great, and you hear this a lot with the teams, they say, if I want to talk to someone about a case that we're commonly on, I just have to walk across the hall. And before, years ago, they would have to call and leave messages and, send word through sometimes family members.
So you are existing more as an agency to which other agencies refer the abused.
Exactly, in order to reduce the trauma on that family. So when you come through this door, you know immediately that you're here, you're safe, and there's hope that your future is going to be better.
So now you have been in the community for a good period of time, and
Yes.
particularly in this issue, you've been involved with for a number of years.
Yes.
Can you give a sense of when you started in this business of being concerned about domestic violence and family safety? How have you seen the community involved? What happened in the culture that this community began to realize we have to work together to help the victims?
We took the onus off of just law enforcement and the courts to deal with it. I truly believe that because we are moving and trying to assist the courts, law enforcement, judges, prosecutors, trying to help them, because they can't solve it. They can, in front of them on that day, can deal with what's happening. But when there's a systemic issue in that family, and when there's greater issues in that family, Other people need to get involved. It's everyone's business, is what we say all the time.
So while you provide a place for safety, you then provide a long-term effort to heal.
Absolutely.
So you would say that Franklin County and the surrounding counties are working together. We're headed in the right direction. We're still dealing with a very serious problem, but there's hope.
There is hope. There is hope, and that's one thing that we say we're doing every day, is restoring hope.
Our domestic violence and stalking unit is led by Annie Murray. She and her staff meet daily with victims as well as partners such as Choices, Franklin County Children's Services, Capital Law School, the County Prosecutor's Office, the Sheriff's Office, and Columbus Police to determine the best strategies to prosecute cases and provide education, support, counseling, crisis intervention, and overall assistance to victims.
We handle about 5,000 cases a year, Rick, but we actually help 7,000 victims each year.
7,000 victims come here every year to receive our help.
Yes, or we are handling their cases. So one of the things that I think is important to know is we want you to come. It's important that you come, but the case isn't going to go away even if you don't come. The best scenario is if you have input in it, if you can help us determine what's going to help you, what you need, what's going to keep you safe. We are going to listen, but we're not going to just dismiss the case outright. We're going to try to figure out what's going to keep you safest and what's going to be right for the community.
Let me follow up on that. So are you saying that a victim who comes to us, and we know from our experience that she's in trouble, if she doesn't want to continue to work with us, we're going to say, no, wait a minute. We know that you are in trouble whether you admit it or not, and we want to make sure you get help. Is that what you're saying?
What we're going to do is not dismiss the case out of hand right away when somebody doesn't want to go forward, because there's a lot of reasons why somebody would not want to go forward.
Such as?
Fear, love. These start out as very loving relationships. Financial considerations, children, there's an awful lot of things.
The woman depends upon the man's finances or depends upon feeding the children, paying the rent?
Yes, and there's a relationship that's at the core of it. So the prosecution is just the middle of a conversation. Their lives are going on, their lives are going to go on after the prosecution, and we're aware of that. So what your unit does, what we do down here, is try to make sure that we're aware of that and that we honor that and try to help prosecute to the best of our ability, and then also to make sure that we figure out what are the needs of this family, what are the needs of this victim, what are the needs of the children, and how can we do that. And so there's a lot that goes on in the unit that is not strictly prosecution. So yes, we are going to prosecute the case. We are not going to just let it go. If we feel that the family's in danger, if we feel that the community's in danger, we're going to go forward. But every inch of that prosecution is going to be with the victim's wants and needs in mind, and hopefully with the victim's help to figure out what's the best thing to do in that situation.
There are two things that victims should be aware of. The first is I often get a lot of calls about how can I drop the charges, how can the case be dismissed, and I think it's important for them to understand that it's the state that picks up the charges. We are prosecuting the case once it's filed, and it is not possible for a victim of domestic violence to dismiss the case. Beyond that, and I think the most important thing of all, is to be involved in the case, to come down and talk to us, to let us know your wishes. Because as a prosecutor, if I don't know what you want, I'm going to make the decision that I think is best. And perhaps that's not the best decision for you.
How much time from the time that victim first appears here to the ultimate resolution does a case normally take?
Generally, it is 2 or 3 court dates. We'll start out with a pretrial, then it's set for a jury trial, and generally speaking, if a case is going to go to trial, it's not done on the first jury trial date. We usually have a second jury trial date. Some cases go longer. Some cases, if the victim is present at the first pretrial and we can have a good conversation about what they want to see happen, we can often resolve a case at the first pretrial date so that people can get on with their lives and don't have to keep coming back to court. Sometimes that's not possible, but generally 2 or 3 court dates, most cases are resolved.
So a victim has to understand that when you first come here, you're going to have to come back a couple more times.
That is true. Most likely you will have to come back a couple more.
And to be patient and to work with us.
Yes, and they're under subpoena, and that's another important factor.
What do you mean you're under? Can you explain what it means when you say you're under subpoena? What does that mean?
When you are first the victim of domestic violence, you're going to have 2 points of contact from our office. The first will be the contact from the advocate, who normally is placing the phone call, talking to the victim, explaining the process. You're also going to receive a subpoena from the court. A lot of people look at this.
So it's a court order.
It is a court order. It is not an invitation to come to court. It is a court order demanding that someone appear at the time and location that that subpoena asks them to be there. It's putting it beyond the victim. It is not their choice of whether they want to come here or not. The defendant can't call them and say, don't come to court. No one can call them and say, don't come to court. It is the job of the court to subpoena them. It is my job as a prosecutor to ask that that subpoena be enforced if the victim of the crime or the person under subpoena does not come forward and present themselves at the time. And ultimately, I need that dialogue, and that's why we want to have that conversation. If you don't answer your subpoena, we can't talk. People call and ask, can I do an interview over the phone? And while I'm happy to talk to you on the phone, answer procedural questions, that does not constitute, in my mind as a prosecutor, a legitimate interview, because anybody could be on the other end of that phone. And in my years of experience, I've actually had other girlfriends or sisters or mothers of defendants call pretending to be the victim, saying they wanted to see something happen. So nothing can replace that face-to-face contact.
Now, a great majority of our emphasis is on protecting that victim. Yet the batterer is out there. Don't we at times concern ourselves about how that batterer, he needs to be addressed to get out of what he's doing, admit what he's got, and correct his behavior?
Yes.
And do we do anything in that regard?
Oh, our office does not, but we as prosecutors definitely try to figure out who is this offender, what's happening in their life, is there something that we can do that can help that person stop the behavior? Because really that's what it's about. It's not whether the victim stays and why is she staying, but it's why does he offend again. So we work very closely with the municipal probation department to get counseling if they have drug and alcohol issues, if they have mental health issues. Many of the batterers have grown up in violent households, so we try to make sure that they get the counseling that they need to try to realize what they're doing and address stress in a different way.
So when the victim comes in, the victim probably, in some cases, still cares for the batterer and may want that person who's abusing her to be helped. So the victim should know that we will take that into consideration when we consider the case.
Absolutely. We are going to meet the victim where she is and try to figure out what's best for both the community and that victim.
Along with the prosecutors, our domestic violence unit has several courtroom advocates and stalking investigators who work in tandem with various community liaisons to provide a variety of services to victims. Our victim advocates provide information about the court process, answer questions, and work as the connection to the prosecutor who will be handling a victim's case.
We have assigned advocates for the arraignment process, which is the first step of the court proceedings. Those two advocates are assigned to arraignment court every day that they're working. There always will be an advocate with you while you're in court, and then each courtroom with their judge has an assigned advocate as well. So as long as you're in contact with us and you're appearing for court cases, we will have an advocate assigned to your case and to meet the needs that you have that day.
Will it be the same advocate once I'm in the system working with the prosecutor's office?
The arraignment advocates stay in arraignment court, so those will be who you meet at first. After that first court date, once you get assigned to a permanent judge, that advocate will remain the same and work with you throughout the pendency of your case.
If an incident was serious, which a lot of them are, and the victims tend to minimize at times, come down to the office. This is a safe place so that you can feel comfortable. You don't have the pressure of the police or necessarily the abuser watching over you. Tell us what happened, and then as an advocate, I go and I talk to the prosecutor and let them know what your concerns are. So if you feel that he needs counseling, come down so that we know that he needs counseling. And then we can help better serve the victims by actually communicating, having that open line of discussion about what actually happened, how they feel about what happened, and where to go from here.
So it's not just that we want to throw your abuser in jail. If she's concerned about his future welfare, there are ways that we can help and then perhaps keep the relationship together, or in some cases the relationship should be broken apart.
Exactly. I mean, it's about making sure that the victim is safe, that they have a safety plan, that if they are going to choose to stay with an abuser, that they know their options for civil protection orders, so that when they are ready to leave, that they have a plan, that they have resources. I understand it's scary. It's just walking into a courtroom can be traumatizing. So as a courtroom advocate, we help guide them through that process so that they can feel comfortable, even if they disagree with the decision that the prosecutor ultimately is in control of and makes. That's okay. We just want to make sure that their voice is heard.
Menacing by stalking occurs when a person commits 2 or more incidents that knowingly cause the victim to believe the offender will cause them physical harm or mental distress. Stalking can involve a number of different acts, including repeated following or watching, unwanted gifts, calls or emails, internet postings, contact with friends, family, employers, or coworkers, and can seriously disrupt the victim's life and peace of mind.
The most dangerous time for a person, a female in a domestic violence relationship, is when she leaves, and a lot of times that's when the stalking begins. So we're here to help victims with their resources, get them protection orders, help them through the court process when they're in a stalking type situation.
So someone wants to leave the situation that's the abusive situation. How do they do that, and how do they feel safe doing that? What do we do to help them feel safe so they'll come to us?
We're there to safety plan with them and let them know what their resources are so that they can make educated decisions on what they're going to do with the relationship and how safely to leave.
There's an understanding at the 17th floor at the Domestic Violence Unit that the process is not easy. It's my opinion that they work from a trauma-informed standpoint, which means they really understand triggers that I may have. The 2 investigators that I worked with were male, and they still were able to create an environment that I felt safe to speak about really difficult things.
First thing we want to start with is historically what's been going on. There's been cases that we've had where people have come in with a very general complaint of telephone harassment. And when we dig beyond their anger and their anguish, we find out that there's been robberies, burglaries, sexual assault, arson, theft, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that we like to do is not look at things at their face value. We take what we have immediately given to us, we very carefully peel back those layers so as not to destroy the evidence. Then we will go out, and the technical part of that is we go out and we do interviews, we do surveillance.
So you don't just sit at a desk?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
You get out, you look for phone records, you look for voicemail messages, you go out and knock on doors, talk to people?
Yes, sir. We sit in cars, we'll sit behind trash cans, we'll sit under cars, we'll do anything that it takes to actually get a view of not only our suspects but of our victims and see how their lives are being changed. We follow the most clearly defined path that will lead us to resolution, which would be prosecution.
We're doing a lot of outreach. We're screening Columbus police reports for anyone who has filed a stalking police report. We'll reach out to them, and folks that are going next door to file for stalking protection orders, we're doing outreach to those people as well.
But with the thousands of those that are filed routinely, it's not possible for us to screen all of those reports. We want to make sure that the reports are filed because that becomes evidence later. But people need to not assume that that's a complaint, that that's a warrant, that that's a call to action by the police or by investigators. It is a report. It becomes evidence, but it is not the battle itself. The battle comes starts when the people come to us. I filed this report. This is my problem. How can you help me?
So a victim needs to understand a timeline here. So a victim comes in, we know now she has a problem, we know now that she's willing to seek our help. What kind of time do you think we're going to need before we can ultimately try to get at a resolution to her problem?
I think it's only fair to let people know that there is no set timeline. The problem could be solved in one phone call. It could be solved in one contact letter, one outreach, one referral. By the same token, we can get into cases that can last a year or more. So it depends on what resolution we want, which is one of the things we ask our victims. Primary concern, or my primary concern, is always safety.
Protection orders can be powerful tools in combating domestic violence or stalking. Criminal protection orders are emergency orders issued only when certain criminal charges are filed and expire when a criminal case is over. Civil protection orders, on the other hand, do not require criminal charges to be filed, but the petitioner must prove certain behavior has occurred. Civil protection orders can remain in place for up to 5 years. Capital University Law School's Family Advocacy Clinic can help victims obtain civil protection orders and get access to other legal remedies.
This is a civil remedy. Many victims don't want to prosecute. their husbands or boyfriends or wives or sisters. What they want is a stay-away order. And we work very closely with the city prosecutor's office, whether or not there are criminal matters pending at all. But the immediate thing that most victims want is protection. They want an order to keep this person away from them, to keep them safe. And that's what we help them with immediately. Beyond that, then if they determined to stay away from this offender, then we may help them with divorce, dissolution, housing issues, and the like.
So if you're to get from a court a civil protection order, what evidence do you need from that victim to be successful in getting that CPO?
Well, we would like to have all the evidence that they might need in a criminal case, but the burden of proof is different. So by preponderance of the evidence, I can get a protection order easier, let's say, than a prosecutor might be able to get a criminal conviction.
So does the victim have to go under oath and make certain sworn statements that certain things happen
Yes.
for a judge to consider granting a CPO?
Yes.
And the victim can feel secure in working with your lawyers and you, that you're there to help them to get this done for them?
Absolutely. We walk them through every step of the process, and we don't tell them what to do to top it off. So we assist them if they decide it's safer for them to change their minds and not go through with the problem. Our philosophy is you come back next time if you need us again.
Once I got connected to the domestic violence unit, I knew that I wouldn't be alone through this process. Whether I were to receive a protection order or not, I felt confident that I actually had what felt like a team behind me. And even if the answer for protection order was no from the judge or magistrate, I was very confident that they would still help me look at additional options that I had.
It is recommended that all victims of domestic violence and stalking consider their unique situation and safety plan before seeking and/or obtaining a protection order. More comprehensive information on protection orders can be found on our website at columbuscityattorney.org. Per state law, city prosecutors in my office handle misdemeanor crimes. It is the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office that handles felony cases.
We handle the felonies, you handle the misdemeanors, but domestic violence becomes a felony on a repeat offense. The second offense is a fourth-degree felony, and then the third offense is a third-degree felony. So it's important to work with your office and the people in your domestic violence unit to look at the cases, because even though it may be a felony, it might be better handled in municipal court because of the strength of the evidence, the nature of the penalty that might be obtained over here versus the common police court. So on a daily basis, actually, the people in our grand jury unit meet with the folks in your domestic violence unit to try and look at the recent arrests, look at what the facts are, look at the desires of the victim.
What I noticed very early on in my years is when I would first meet with the victims, the one thing they would say is that they were just scared. They were embarrassed, they were humiliated to be here. And so what our unit does is we try to help them, assist them getting through the system. Many victims have been victimized before, but many have not. And so this criminal justice system is very intimidating to them. And so what we do as victim advocates is assist them in navigating the system.
If there's a strong one-sentence message you want to get the victims out there about what you do and how we can help, what would that be?
I think just to assure the victims of crime as they're going through these cases, the domestic violence victims, that they are not alone. There is somebody here in the system that wants to help them, that is here to help them. This is what we're here for. All of us work pretty closely together and are very good about making sure the victims and survivors of these crimes are hooked up, linked to the services that they need.
Another community partner working with us is the Buckeye Region Anti-Violence Organization, also known as Bravo. This is an organization that serves the LBGT community. Lauren, can you tell us what kind of situations arise for domestic violence among partners and how Bravo helps?
Sure. I mean, the situations that LGBTQ survivors face are very similar to what a heterosexual relationship that's experiencing domestic violence might face. There's the same power and control that exists in the relationship. However, there are some differences. You know, for an LGBTQ person, it may not be safe for them to be out in the community or out in their workplace.
So if someone has a problem with their partner, how do they know you're here and how to help them, and how do you help them in that respect?
we are a statewide organization. So through word of mouth and through people getting connected with other agencies, they can get referred here, and their friends who maybe have accessed our services in the past will refer people.
So after being with you, do they understand their rights when being abused, and do they get a sense of comfort and security having talked with you?
Yes, they do. I mean, I think the first and foremost thing we do is that we're here to listen to them and to validate their experiences. Just for any survivor, it's really difficult to pick up the phone and ask for help, but for a survivor in our community, it can be even harder if they've experienced homophobia or biphobia or transphobia from other agencies, and we're here to provide them a judgment-free atmosphere and provide them support.
So they shouldn't feel alone.
They shouldn't feel alone.
And this is a place of security and safety for them to come.
It is, yeah. I mean, we are a safe place. We're here to listen. We provide confidential services for all the people that seek help with us. And you can report anonymously as well and still get help if, coming out and saying your name is not something that you're comfortable with. But they're not alone. I mean, I think the thing that we see in the mainstream is when people talk about domestic violence, they're seeing a male perpetrator and a female survivor, which, might be the overwhelming majority of domestic violence situations. But the rate of domestic violence happens at the same rate in the LGBTQI community. About 25 to 33% of same-sex relationships experience domestic violence, and that's the same rate that we see within the heterosexual relationships.
And they know those folks that are hurt as a victim know they can come here.
If there's anything that I could tell any survivor that's considering giving us a call, it's that we're a safe place and that you're not alone and that it's also not your fault.
Having to appear in court can seem daunting and even intimidating at times. But we spoke with some judges about what victims and witnesses can expect if called to testify in court.
The court's role is in making sure that the information is available and that the time is provided to get that information out there. We, being aware that domestic violence is a crime of violence and that victims have a right to be present, have the responsibility to give the victim advocates time to talk to the victims.
Court can be very intimidating, but people should know that if you come down here, you'll see that everybody is a normal person. We're all willing to help. The prosecutor's office has a great unit of people who are there for the victims and to be their support. So they should know, as uncomfortable as the situations are, they should know that the people here in the courthouse are there for them to make them feel as comfortable as possible and help.
When they're first talking to someone, they will not have to directly confront their abuser. That if they're in a situation where they don't feel that they can look at that person and say that I need this protection, that they have the opportunity to talk to a victim advocate and to be very honest with that victim advocate, and the victim advocate can then, through the prosecution, give the court the information they need to protect them.
The victim advocates will make sure the prosecuting witness, as we call them in the court system, knows where they would sit on the witness stand. They know the process of being sworn to tell the truth. They have a sense of how the prosecutor will first ask them questions, and then they'd be cross-examined by the defense attorney. So, if you have experience being in that place, feeling, what the questions will be, it certainly calms you down in a stressful situation.
It's important to remember that the people at the courthouse do this every day. So the language of the courthouse, those are their norms. But it's important to know that you have a right to ask questions, to ask for alternative options if you hear a no, because those are freedoms that we have, and it's something that we are able to act on, especially when we do have investigators or an attorney or advocates on our side.
But for a victim to need help, they first have to come to the system, so the system will protect them.
That is the goal. That is our goal, is to make sure that the system makes it possible for them to tell their side of the story.
I will be fully honest and say that it was exhausting to file a protection order. One of the things I really appreciated about the domestic violence unit, when other people had previously told me no, an absolute no, I was told by the investigators that they would do everything that they could to try. So although they were honest with me and said it may not happen, they were also honest with me and said that they would do everything in their power to help make it happen. So now that I have the protection order, I really leave my home with a sense of freedom. I walk out of my door with a level of confidence, knowing the safety plan that I have in place, and that the safety plan now not only involves myself and my husband and my family and friends, it also involves the domestic violence unit, local police officers, and the court system. And when I remember that I have that support system, it's much easier to live freely and openly.
After watching this program, I hope you have a better understanding of our domestic violence and stalking unit and the essential partners who work diligently to help protect and assist victims. I also hope you noticed some recurrent themes while watching. In the Columbus community, there are many individuals and organizations who daily work together to provide victims the protection and services they need, while also holding offenders accountable for their violence. And finally, the most important message: we are here to help. Call us. I'm Columbus City Attorney Rick Pfeiffer. Thank you for watching.
You've been watching Just the Facts. Join us next time as we provide more insight into the efforts of Rick Pfeiffer and his staff at the Columbus City Attorney's Office.